You did not stumble upon this video by chance. You are here because somewhere deep inside, you have felt the tension between truth and illusion, between what society tells you and what you secretly suspect to be real. And perhaps you've noticed that most people are terrified of facing truths that disturb them, especially when those truths come from a philosopher like Arthur Schopenhauer. Schopenhauer was not a man who softened his words. He was not interested in comfort, in popularity, or in painting life with colors of hope. He was a man obsessed with uncovering what lies beneath human behavior, with tearing away the masks that we wear. And when he looked at women, he wrote things that even today provoke anger, rejection, and disbelief. He revealed dynamics of manipulation, instinct, survival, and power that most of us prefer to ignore, and that is why his message still shocks the world. But let us be clear. This is not about attacking or glorifying one gender. It is about exposing psychological mechanisms, the raw forces of desire, fear, and self-preservation that shape human relationships. Schopenhauer believed that most of our ideals about love, romance, and gender are illusions, masks created by nature to hide its true agenda, survival of the species. He stripped away the poetry of love and replaced it with biology, with instinct, with the brutal truth that men and women use each other, often unconsciously, for purposes they barely understand. You have felt this. You have felt how attraction blinds you, how desire makes you ignore flaws, how manipulation appears subtly in relationships. You have felt the emptiness after giving too much, the sting of rejection, the sense that sometimes you are being used. Schopenhauer would say, of course, this is not a failure of love. This is love's design. Beneath every tender word lies a strategy. Beneath every promise lies instinct. Beneath every sacrifice lies the will to survive. For Schopenhauer, women symbolized the power of nature itself. He argued that their influence was not accidental, but biological. In his famous essay, On Women, he wrote words that many still cannot bear to read. He claimed that women were guided more strongly by instinct than by reason, that their nature was tied to reproduction, to survival, to securing stability for themselves and their children. To him, women embodied what he called the will to life, the blind force of existence that compels all beings to preserve and multiply. And here lies the controversy, because while modern readers recoil, Schopenhauer insisted he was not insulting women but revealing their secret strength. He said that women, by nature, understood life's realities more clearly than men. They knew that survival mattered more than dreams, that security mattered more than ideals. And so, he argued, women developed cunning, charm, and psychological power to achieve what brute force could not. In his eyes, men often lived in illusions, chasing honor, philosophy, or art, while women grasped the practical essence of existence to endure. This perspective is brutal, but if you look honestly, can you deny that elements of it echo in your own life? How often have you seen relationships where attraction hides calculation? How often have you noticed that words of love are mixed with demands, with expectations, with strategies for control? Schopenhauer was not polite, but he was observant. He saw love not as pure selflessness, but as a battlefield of instincts. And when he described women, he described the power of those instincts to shape men, to bind them, to direct their energy toward survival and reproduction. Now you might feel resistance rising in you. You might say, but love is more than that. Love is poetry. Love is sacrifice. Love is transcendence. And yes, it can be But Schopenhauer would confront you with a harder question. Is that poetry a mask? Is that sacrifice truly free? Or is it driven by forces beneath your awareness? Is transcendence real? Or is it just a dream that nature whispers to you so you keep playing the game of survival? The problem, he reveals, is not only about women. It is about humanity itself. Both men and women are players in this unconscious game. Men seek youth, beauty, fertility, even if they pretend otherwise. Women seek strength, stability, resources, even if they disguise it as romance. Neither is evil. Both are driven by the same will to life. But when Schopenhauer put these truths into words, he shattered the illusions of his time, and he still shatters ours. Think about your own experiences. How often have you felt that your relationships were haunted by hidden contracts, by unspoken exchanges? How often have you noticed that when you strip away the poetry, what remains is a negotiation? Who gives what? Who secures what? Who sacrifices what? Schopenhauer's message is that until you face these truths, you remain a slave to them. Only when you see through the illusions can you begin to live consciously. But here is where his thought becomes even darker. He believed that most people cannot live consciously. They prefer the dream. They prefer to believe in eternal love, in idealized partners, in the fantasy that relationships are free from survival, and so they are controlled by instincts while pretending to be free. Empires rise and fall, art is created, wars are fought, and beneath it all, the hidden engine is the same, the will to life manifest in attraction, in reproduction, in the dance between men and women. Why does this still shock us? Because we do not want to believe that our highest feelings could be rooted in something so animal, so instinctual. We want to think that our love stories are unique, pure, transcendent. Schopenhauer's words feel like betrayal, like desecration of the sacred, and yet, when you look honestly at how relationships unfold, his observations remain disturbingly accurate. That is why people attack him, not because he was entirely wrong, but because he touched the nerve of something we would rather not see. And so, we arrive at the problem. You too have lived these illusions. You too have been manipulated or have manipulated, often without realizing. You, added too, have felt how attraction and love can enslave, how they can lead you to choices you later regret. Schopenhauer forces us to confront that these patterns are not accidents. They are the very structure of life, and unless you awaken, unless you face the truth beneath appearances, you will remain trapped. This is why his message is still relevant. Not because it flatters, but because it confronts. Not because it comforts, but because it disturbs. Jung would later expand on this, showing how projection and shadow shape our relationships. Nietzsche would transform it into a philosophy of power and self-overcoming. But Schopenhauer was one of the first to strip away the illusions and show us the raw mechanics of desire. And when it came to women, he exposed a force that most men underestimate: the psychological and instinctual power to direct the course of life itself. This is not easy to hear, but if you are still here, it means you are willing to face hard truths. You are not afraid of shadows. You want to see what lies behind the mask. And in the next part, we will go deeper. We will explore how Schopenhauer's insights about women connect to your own struggles, rejection, emptiness, manipulation, and how facing them can free you from illusions that drain your life. Because only by seeing clearly can you begin to live consciously. You've now seen the foundation of Schopenhauer's thought, his stripping away of illusions, his claim that love and gender dynamics are not angelic, but animalistic. But to truly understand why his message about women still shocks the world, we need to go deeper into his exact observations, the controversies they ignited, and the psychological truths hidden beneath his harsh words. because it is not enough to dismiss him as a pessimist. The real question is, why do his words still disturb us centuries later? Perhaps because they are not entirely false. In his essay on women, Schopenhauer made claims that were so controversial that many of his contemporaries accused him of hatred. He wrote that women were, in his words, childlike, short-sighted, and less capable of abstract reasoning. He argued that their power did not come from intellect, but from intuition, charm, and emotional influence. He said that women live more in the present than in the future, more concerned with immediate survival than with abstract ideals. At first glance, these statements appear insulting, crude, and outdated, and perhaps they are. But pause for a moment. Ask yourself, why do they provoke such rage? Could it be that, beneath their roughness, Schopenhauer was pointing to dynamics that still exist, though we would rather dress them in softer language? Think about it. Have you not seen how men often dream of grand futures while women, throughout history, had to be practical about survival? Have you not noticed how women, often excluded from systems of power, developed influence through other channels: persuasion, seduction, psychological control? Schopenhauer's critics accused him of reducing women to stereotypes. Yet he himself claimed he was not insulting them, but revealing their strategy. He believed that women's strength was hidden in their ability to influence men indirectly, to shape decisions without appearing to control them. And he feared this power because it was invisible, subtle, harder to resist. In his eyes, men might dominate physically or politically, but women controlled through what he called the cunning of nature. This phrase, the cunning of nature, is crucial. For Schopenhauer, nature itself was not kind, not moral, not interested in justice. Nature was ruthless, obsessed only with reproduction and survival. And women, he said, were nature's chosen instruments for ensuring this. Their instincts, their beauty, their psychology, all designed, he claimed, to bind men into the service of reproduction. Even the greatest heroes, he wrote, have been undone by women. Even the wisest philosophers have fallen into the trap of desire. Why? Because nature is stronger than reason. You might resist this view. You might want to say, but love is not just biology. Love is soul, spirit, transcendence. Yet Schopenhauer would stare at you with his cold eyes and ask, is it, or is that transcendence only a disguise that nature invented so that you would accept your chains willingly? He would remind you that even the most passionate love stories often collapse when practical realities, money, security, children, enter the picture. He would argue that what we call heartbreak is simply the collapse of an illusion. And here is where his message cuts deep, because you know this. You have felt it. You have been in love and then discovered manipulation, disappointment, emptiness. You have believed in promises only to realize they were driven by hidden motives. You have sacrificed only to find that your sacrifice was not reciprocated. Schopenhauer's point is that these betrayals are not exceptions. They are the rule. They happen because love itself is built on deception, not always conscious deception, but the deception of nature. Let's examine one of his most radical claims. He argued that men are deceived by women's beauty because beauty is nature's trick. It is not random. It signals youth, fertility, the ability to reproduce. And so, he said, men are drawn unconsciously to what perpetuates life, even if they believe they are simply falling in love. Women, in turn, are drawn not primarily to beauty but to strength, resources, stability, because these increase the chances of survival for their children. This, he argued, is why love so often feels unequal, why men chase appearance while women calculate security. To Schopenhauer, this was not romance, it was strategy. And this, perhaps, is the most offensive part of his philosophy. The suggestion that our highest feelings are disguises for survival. that what we call love is simply biology dressed in poetry, that what we call romance is merely a contract negotiated by instincts. People hate Schopenhauer not because he is completely wrong, but because he forces us to face the possibility that we are not as noble as we think. But here is where things get interesting, because while Schopenhauer wrote these words in the 19th century, modern psychology and evolutionary theory echo many of his points. Today, we speak of evolutionary psychology, of mate selection, of unconscious preferences. Studies show that men often prioritize physical attractiveness linked to fertility, while women often prioritize resources and stability. Scientists may use softer language than Schopenhauer, but the essence is the same, and that is why his words still sting, because even now, evidence suggests he saw something real. Yet we must be careful. To take Schopenhauer literally, without critique, would be dangerous. His words can easily be twisted into misogyny, into excuses for inequality. But the deeper lesson is not hatred, it is awareness. He forces us to see that relationships are not only about love, but also about power, survival, strategy. And once you see this, you cannot unsee it. You begin to recognize the games being played in others and in yourself. Imagine you are in a relationship. You notice that your partner demands constant attention. You feel drained. You wonder why. Schopenhauer would say, this is not random, this is survival. She is securing energy, resources, commitment, or imagine the opposite. You chase beauty, ignoring red flags, losing yourself in obsession. Schopenhauer would again say, this is not romance, this is instinct. You are not in control. Nature is, and until you awaken, you are her slave. This is why his message still shocks. It is not simply that he said harsh things about women, it is that he revealed the unconscious forces driving all of us. He stripped away the dream and showed the abyss beneath. And most people cannot bear to look. They would rather cling to illusions. They would rather pretend that their relationships are pure, that their desires are noble. But Schopenhauer drags you into the shadows, forces you to look at yourself, and whispers, you are not free. So where does this leave us? If his words are true, does this mean love is meaningless? Does it mean relationships are only manipulation and survival? Not entirely. For Schopenhauer, awareness is the beginning of freedom. He believed that by recognizing the cunning of nature, we can detach from its chains. We can stop being blind slaves of desire. We may not escape instinct completely, but we can see it for what it is, and in that clarity we can live differently. This is the deeper problem. You live in illusions because they are comfortable, but illusions make you weak, vulnerable to manipulation. By facing Schopenhauer's harsh truths, you gain power. You begin to see the hidden contracts in every interaction. You begin to understand why people behave as they do. And in that understanding, you are less easily deceived. And yet, facing these truths comes with a cost. You will feel loneliness. You will feel isolation. Because once you see through illusions, you cannot fully participate in them. You may watch others cling to fantasies of eternal love while you see the negotiations beneath. You may hear words of passion and recognize the strategy inside them. This can be painful, but it can also be liberating, because awareness frees you from being a pawn in the game of survival. This is why Schopenhauer's message is both dangerous and necessary. Dangerous because it can be twisted into bitterness, into cynicism, into misogyny. Necessary because without it, you remain a prisoner of illusions. The challenge is to hold his truth without drowning in it, to recognize survival without denying meaning, to see manipulation without becoming manipulative, to look into the abyss and still choose how to live. And this is where we end for now. In the next part, we will dive into the deepest shadows of Schopenhauer's philosophy, how his view of women connects to his larger theory of suffering, how his pessimism about life itself shaped his ideas, and how you can use this knowledge not to fall into despair, but to rise into awareness. Because only by confronting the most uncomfortable truths can you begin to free yourself from them. We have already walked into the controversial territory of Schopenhauer's reflections on women, but now we must go further, into the abyss that connects his view of gender to his larger philosophy of life itself. To understand why his message still shocks, we cannot treat his essay on women in isolation. We must see it as part of the architecture of his thought, a philosophy built on the recognition that life itself is suffering, that desire enslaves us, and that nature manipulates us to keep its endless cycle alive. Schopenhauer is often called the philosopher of pessimism, but this word is misleading. He was not simply negative, he was relentless in describing reality as he saw it, stripped of illusions, stripped of hope, stripped of masks. And when he looked at life, he saw a cruel machine driven by what he called the will to life. This will is not rational. It is blind, unconscious, insatiable. It is the force that pushes all beings to survive, to reproduce, to continue. And it does not care about your happiness. It only cares about perpetuating itself. Now, what does this have to do with women? Everything. Because for Schopenhauer, women were the direct embodiment of nature's will to life. He believed that their instincts, their cunning, their ability to attract and bind men were nature's way of ensuring reproduction. Women were not free, he said. They were nature's instruments. Their beauty, their psychology, their desires, all designed to trap men into serving the will to life. This was not praise. It was not insult. It was revelation. Women as the masks of nature, the carriers of survival's command. Imagine his vision. Men dream of freedom, of philosophy, of art, of conquest, but in the end, they fall for beauty, for desire, for the promise of love. And in falling, they chain themselves to the will to life. They work, they fight, they sacrifice, often for women and children. Schopenhauer would say, do not fool yourself. You are not free. You are being used by nature. You believe you are in love, but you are enslaved. You believe you chose, but instinct chose for you. This is why his words about women shocked not only his time, but ours. Because if he is right, then love itself is not pure. It is manipulation, not necessarily conscious manipulation, but the manipulation of nature, using women as its instruments and men as its servants. And this strikes at the very heart of our illusions. We want to believe love is sacred. Schopenhauer says, love is a trick, but let us be precise. He did not think women consciously designed this. He did not believe they sat down and planned strategies of manipulation. He thought nature itself designed them this way, instinctual, intuitive, cunning, driven by reproduction. They were, in his words, less capable of abstract reason because they were more tied to the concrete realities of life, raising children, securing stability, enduring existence. While men, he thought, wasted themselves on abstract dreams, women stayed closer to nature's truth. Now pause and ask yourself, is this entirely false? How often have you seen men obsessed with illusions of glory, honor, or wealth, only to collapse in despair when life refuses to cooperate? And how often have you seen women, even in the harshest conditions, endure, adapt, survive? Schopenhauer's critics accused him of misogyny, but perhaps he was also recognizing a kind of hidden strength. Women, for him, were not less powerful, but differently powerful. Not abstract, but practical. Not dreamers, but survivors. And yet he feared them, because he saw in them nature's hand, invisible and irresistible. He saw men undone by desire, losing themselves in passion, sacrificing their freedom for the promise of love. He saw women binding men to family, to duty, to survival. and he believed that behind every love story was the shadow of the will to life, laughing at our illusions. This connects to his larger philosophy of suffering. For Schopenhauer, to live is to suffer because desire never ends. The moment you satisfy one desire, another arises. You are restless, unsatisfied, enslaved, and nothing enslaves you more than love. Why? Because love convinces you that your suffering has meaning. It convinces you that obsession is noble, that sacrifice is holy, that losing yourself in another is beautiful. And yet when love collapses, when rejection comes, when betrayal cuts, when the dream dies, you see the truth. You were deceived. You were used by nature to play its game. This is why he considered love the greatest illusion of all, because it enslaves you willingly. You throw yourself into chains and call it happiness. You submit to instinct and call it destiny. You suffer and call it beauty. Schopenhauer's cruelty was that he would not let you hide in these illusions. He forced you to see love not as transcendence, but as necessity, not as heaven, but as survival. This is why his views on women matter. They are not isolated insults. They are part of his war against illusion. Women, to him, symbolized nature's cunning. Men, in their desire for women, symbolized humanity's enslavement. Together, they revealed the prison of the will to life. And unless you awaken, unless you recognize this prison, you will remain trapped. Now you might feel despair rising. If Schopenhauer is right, then what hope is there? If love is illusion, if desire is enslavement, if women are nature's instruments, then what meaning is left? Here we touch the darkest part of his philosophy. Schopenhauer believed that true freedom is almost impossible. The will to life controls us all. But he suggested two escapes. One was art, the contemplation of beauty detached from desire. The other was asceticism, the denial of desire, the refusal to play nature's game. In art, we escape briefly. In asceticism, we escape permanently. But how many are capable of this? Very few, and so most remain slaves. Most remain trapped in illusions. Most remain blinded by desire, manipulated by instinct, deceived by nature's tricks. This is why Schopenhauer shocks us. He tells us not that some relationships are illusions, but that all of them are. He does not say some people manipulate, but that manipulation is built into the structure of life itself. Think about your own experiences again. When you fell in love, did you not feel as if the universe itself conspired to bring you together? Did you not feel destiny, inevitability, transcendence? And yet, how often did that destiny collapse into disappointment, betrayal, emptiness? Schopenhauer would say, exactly, because it was never destiny, it was instinct. And when instinct is satisfied or frustrated, the illusion collapses. So what can you do? You cannot erase instinct. You cannot erase desire, but you can awaken. You can see through the illusion. You can recognize when you are being manipulated, when you are losing yourself in fantasy, and in that recognition, you gain power. You may still fall in love, but you will not be blinded. You may still desire, but you will not call it destiny. You may still suffer, but you will know why. This is Schopenhauer's gift and his curse. He takes away your illusions, and with them, your comfort. But he gives you clarity. He gives you the power to see life as it is. And in that clarity, there is freedom. Not the freedom of happiness, but the freedom of truth. And this is where we pause. Because, in the next part, we will face the final step of his message, how Schopenhauer's vision of women, love, and desire ties into his ultimate philosophy of renunciation, and how you, confronted with these truths, can choose to live not as a slave of illusions, but as one who sees clearly. We will reveal how, in the shadows of his pessimism, there is still a path to inner strength, to authenticity, to freedom. We now arrive at the final part of Schopenhauer's shocking message, not only about women, but about life itself. To stop at his observations on love, desire, and gender would be to miss the larger point. Because Schopenhauer was not merely writing about women, he was writing about the tragedy of human existence, about the chains of instinct, about the illusions that enslave us. His essay on women was only one chapter in a lifelong war against self-deception, and his war was always aimed at one enemy, the will to life. This will to life, as we have seen, is blind, insatiable, and cruel. It drives every living being to struggle, to reproduce, to continue. It does not care about your happiness, your dreams, your illusions. It cares only about survival, and in Schopenhauer's eyes, women were the clearest expression of this will. Not because they chose to be, but because nature designed them to be. Their instincts, their desires, their beauty, all instruments of nature's strategy to keep the species alive. Men, in turn, were its prisoners, believing themselves free while enslaved by love. But here is where the darkness deepens, because if Schopenhauer is right, then no one escapes. Men are slaves of desire, women are slaves of nature's cunning. Both are instruments, not masters, and life itself is the prison. If you resist, you suffer. If you submit, you suffer. The game is rigged, and the house always wins. This is why he shocked his world. This is why he still shocks ours, because he denies the most comforting illusion of all, that life is designed for your happiness. And yet, within this bleak vision lies a hidden path. Schopenhauer believed that though the will to life enslaves us, awareness can free us, not from suffering entirely, but from illusion. To see through the game is the first act of liberation, to understand that love is instinct, that desire is slavery, that women and men alike are manipulated by nature. This awareness strips you of comfort, but it gives you clarity, and clarity is power. How can this power be used? Schopenhauer offered two possibilities, art and asceticism. Art, he said, gives us temporary escape. When you look at a painting, when you listen to music, when you contemplate beauty, you are no longer desiring, no longer striving, you are simply perceiving. For a moment, you step outside the will to life, you transcend. That is why art matters. It is a window into freedom. Asceticism, however, was his final answer. He looked to monks, mystics, saints, those who denied desire, who renounced life, who turned their backs on survival itself. In them, he saw the ultimate rebellion against the will to life. To deny desire is to deny slavery. To renounce reproduction is to renounce nature's cunning. To live in silence, in detachment, is to step outside the prison. Few can do this. But for Schopenhauer, it was the highest possibility of human existence. Now, you may not want to become an ascetic. You may not wish to renounce love, relationships, the world itself. And perhaps you should not. But you can still take his lesson. You can still awaken. You can still see through illusions. You can still recognize when desire is manipulating you, when instinct is disguising itself as destiny, when survival is dressing up as romance. And in that recognition, you can choose. You may still love, but you will not be blind. You may still desire, but you will not be deceived. You may still suffer, but you will know why. And that knowledge changes everything. Because when you understand the game, you are no longer merely a pawn. You may not escape the board entirely, but you can move with awareness. You can stop sacrificing yourself to illusions. You can stop being controlled by promises that were never real. You can stop expecting happiness from what cannot give it. Instead, you can create meaning where none is given. You can choose clarity over comfort. You can choose truth over fantasy. But let us be honest. This path is not easy. To awaken is to lose illusions. To lose illusions is to feel alone. You may look at others who still believe in destiny, in romantic lies, in comforting myths, and you may feel envy. They seem happy, they seem safe. You, in contrast, see the emptiness behind the curtain, and yet remember this: their happiness is fragile. It collapses when reality intrudes. Yours, though harder, is built on truth, and truth, though painful, is unshakable. So what is Schopenhauer's final message about women? It is not simply insult, it is not merely misogyny, it is revelation. Women, for him, symbolize the cunning of nature, the trap of love, the mask of survival. But men were no better. They too were slaves of desire, prisoners of instinct, blind dreamers chasing illusions. His harshness toward women was only part of his greater harshness toward humanity itself. He was not only attacking women, he was attacking all illusions, male, female, human. His enemy was not women, but deception. And here lies the paradox. Though his words wound, they also heal. Because when you see through illusions, you are no longer their victim. You may not escape suffering, but you escape deceit, and that is the beginning of freedom. This is why his message still shocks. Not because it is hateful, but because it is mercilessly honest. Now, let us bring this back to you. What does this mean for your life? It means you must stop expecting salvation from illusions. It means you must stop seeking happiness in places where only survival reigns. It means you must stop being blind. And once you stop, you begin to live differently. You begin to question promises, to see strategies, to recognize manipulation. You begin to protect your energy, your freedom, your mind. You begin to live not as a slave of the will to life, but as an awakened observer of it. Practical steps follow naturally. Learn to recognize when desire is consuming you. Step back. Observe. Ask, is this instinct or is this choice? Practice silence. In silence, you hear not illusions, but truth. Practice boundaries. Say no when others demand too much of you. Say no when your own instincts pull you into chains. Practice detachment. Love if you choose, but do not worship love. Desire if you must, but do not kneel before it. Remember, awareness is power, and so we arrive at the end. Schopenhauer revealed truths that the world still hates to hear. He showed that love is illusion, that women symbolize nature's cunning, that men are prisoners of desire, that life itself is suffering. But he also showed that in awareness lies freedom, that by facing the darkest truths, you become stronger, clearer, unshakable. His words may shock you, they may disturb you, but they also invite you to awaken. So I ask you now, are you ready to look beyond illusions? Are you ready to face the shadows? Are you ready to choose awareness over comfort? If so, write in the comments, I choose clarity, or write your own reflection. Share how this truth speaks to you. Speak your awakening into the world. And remember, this is only the beginning. Subscribe and join us as we continue to explore the philosophers who dared to reveal what others hid, because in their shadows you may find your own light.